So I'll kick it off with Roz first and then on to Jill. Did COVID ultimately help your business and given your such unique verticals, or did it harm it?
So it really helped it. The vertical that we're in is actually over events. So what we call events, which is hurricanes, forest fires, we're a provider of materials to businesses to help restore, as well as safety and PPE. So we are sanitation and janitorial. We picked up a lot of customers, as you can imagine. We went from averaging in our CRM, for example, about 30 to 50,000 customers to 400 in a matter of 2 months. So we had a lot of change and had to be very quick to market on things.
Yeah, and similar situation at Mister. We were really fortunate actually going into the pandemic. We're a high growth company. We had experienced 39 quarters of consecutive sales growth. And we were fortunate that we saw that growth continue in the pandemic, but it wasn't a sure thing. And what I mean by that is, I'm sure we can all remember what we were doing mid-March, March 16th. We all met in a boardroom and said, what are we going to do? There was so much unknown. And we made the decision, because all of our employees interact with the public, we shut down for a month. We paid our employees, but we wanted to take an opportunity to figure out how are we going to first and foremost ensure that we can keep our employees safe. When we reopen, how are we going to keep our customers and our members? We offer an unlimited subscription wash club. How are we going to keep our members safe? And we spent that month. We, at the time, had north of 1 million members, and personally either called or emailed all of them. We refunded them that month. We thanked them for their business. And then we kind of crossed our fingers and reopened. And when we reopened, we were so pleased to see that the business then continued to grow and move, up to the right. And really a lot of that was driven by where pre-pandemic, the business success came from. I just love the feeling of a clean car. And then when in the midst of the pandemic, it turned more into, I need to keep my car clean because cleanliness was, on top of everyone's mind. And those thoughts shifted through the pandemic, and, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're really fortunate that we thrived in the pandemic.
I mean, being on the agency side, I got to see us kind of the spectrum of how the different verticals reacted. Whenever there's a state of panic, we see a huge rise in the demand and success of vices. So pharmaceuticals, unfortunately, alcohol, and fast food. So those all for us went through the absolute roof and truly thrived on it, and was largely carried on paid media, but there was a high demand. But then we looked at what we call our old reliable verticals. Automotive sales, gone. Travel still hasn't recovered. And apparel, well, honestly, most of us weren't wearing pants. So when you looked at it from end to end thing, depending on the vertical, you either thrived or died, unfortunately. And there was very little in between as things went on. But kind of hopping into, just kind of progressing the conversation, any specific media channels that you all relied on a lot more, a lot less during it?
Sure. So there were really 3 channels that we leaned in a lot heavier into as we started to go into the pandemic, and then now for the last 2 years. First for us really has been search, and just being more in tune in terms of what are our customers or potential customers looking for, and how can we insert ourselves in that conversation. So a lot of change within just how we've approached our keywords, where we want to be present, and then the type of content we've developed to be relevant with that. Second channel that became a lot more important to us was listings and reviews, and not so much trying to get positive reviews. It really was more around reading our reviews, understanding that unsolicited feedback, what's being said about our business, and how can we either turn that into whether it's a process improvement, whether it impacts then content that we would develop that aligns with what we're hearing in that feedback. So that was something that became much more of greater importance to us. And then the last was really our own kind of web and app. Pre-pandemic, for those of you who are familiar with the car wash industry, it's really an emerging industry, and there's not a lot of, or if I go back 2 years, there wasn't a lot of, say, technology advancement on the digital platform side, we came together pretty quickly and realized that we needed to move a lot of our service to a web app service, because pre-pandemic, it all was happening either at our locations or through our member concierge service, which was predominantly phone call. So those are really the three channels, with search being the predominant on the paid side.
For us, it was because it was fast and furious. There was historically just paid search is what we really advertised in. It was just the brand terms. Our brand is well known in the industry for restoration supplies and safety, but we had this whole new set, and the website itself and paid media was looked at as lead flow only for the sales team. We had sales team strong of 250 team members out in the field, and none of them could have taken in 400,000. So it became technology as master, as well as making sure that we were using the media channels to help these guys get to the website and actually convert better on their own. So we actually had an emerging segment come out of COVID for us, which was our B2B became B2C. And paid search was still the lead there.
Hear that, everyone? Search. Just saying. I mean, when we look at it, the rule of thumb that we've always gone by is no one in life will ever win if Google search doesn't win first. It's the one constant mainstay that's always grown. We've seen it grow out through the entire pandemic, with the lone exception of the travel vertical. It always will sit there and maintain its growth. But other things that really came to light was everyone's on lockdown, everyone's at home, our social consumption, not necessarily our reach, but the actual frequency and the consumption of social platforms went through the absolute roof. So we had to start leaning more heavily into social. We also saw this massive growth in CTV. Linear television really remained stagnant because those are where the primary consumers stayed the same. But our CTV reach just went through leaps and bounds. So we started taking away our traditional media, our linear TV, our regular radio, print, and start reallocating that back in. Search had already more or less peaked. So we're starting to put that into the social and the CTV components. So besides the physical operations, how do your marketing strategies ultimately change? Specifically, how did digital adapt to the challenging times that COVID brought with us?
So for us, it became, how do we make pickup happen? How do we let people know when our locations are open and someone there to service them so they can get that supplies quickly? As well as making sure that we have on-time shipping and good communication, because we didn't have those processes set up. So we used shopping and paid search extensions a lot to let our customers know when we had product and we didn't. Everybody needed face masks. Everybody wanted sanitation gear. And they were coming to the website, and we didn't have the technology on the back end to let them know. So we used actually paid search and shopping as our outbound communicator until we built the technology. So now we've gotten used to using a lot of those mechanisms in a different way out of the box so that our customers know what's going on in their area.
You know, our operating model is really contactless, right? You drive through our tunnel, you leave, and you're not necessarily having to interact. So we were fortunate that through the pandemic, we were viewed as a safe place to go, but we wanted to ensure we were communicating that. We really leaned in predominantly with just our own channels, a lot of email communication, a lot of SMS communication. And then there is one vertical, though, that was new for us, and it had nothing to do with the pandemic. It just was kind of coincidental timing. We ramped up what we call just our greenfield program. So we were opening new locations. And at those locations, that's where we've been testing what does it look like when we bring in, on top of paid search, programmatic and paid social, as well as just some good old fashioned grassroots PR, and leverage then the message of Mr. Car Wash. It's safe, it's convenient. For those of you who are locked up in your homes and you just needed a little bit of entertainment, it's fun. And using those channels as really a test bed with our greenfields that now we're looking to expand across the rest of our footprint.
When I look at all the clients that we handle, we went into a few different scenarios that essentially went across everyone. The concept of brand safety greatly changed for us. We became, not saying that we stopped doing, but we became less concerned about our ads showing next to divisive or traumatic content, and more about, all right, we probably should not be coming off tone deaf, encouraging our hospitals to bring patients in for in-person appointments. So we had to change our concept of our messaging to align with what we consider brand safe, so that we're not being a direct result of spreading the virus, but still trying to maintain our business. The other big thing is we had to sit down and say, all right, we are in, I hate to say this term, but we are in uncertain times. We don't know what our revenue flow or our profitability is going to be for a long-term basis. So we have one of two routes we can take. We can try and cut back our media spend a lot and focus on a high ROI and then make up for that revenue in a year. Or we turn around and say, let's get all the cash on hand that we can, take a loss, but drive more and more revenue at a negative ROI. If we're lucky, we'll keep a positive ROI, and then make up that ROI on the back end of things. So each client, it was a case-by-case basis. We had to sit down and say, what is your ultimate goal? What is your cash on hand? So that we can then redevelop a game plan for you to be able to push forward in this scenario. So just kind of chugging along here, have you developed any new approaches have you developed any new approaches during COVID that for your digital game plan that are actually going to continue on for you all? Is it going to be an evergreen part of your strategy?
Yeah, so interesting enough, coming out of a year like that in 2021, we had a huge drop. So we start to see all those homeowners, all of the customers that are not businesses necessarily stop purchasing from us. So that's when we actually ramped up all the channels. We went ahead and got into test campaigns across display, heavier into shopping, and then went out to paid social as well. So for us, 2021 and into the first quarter of 2022 has been a lot of testing of where and how do we get these guys to come back to us, and how can we add value outside of just PPE for these folks. So we have found that shopping, while not our conversion point, it's not our last click model. It actually is our awareness channel. When we turn off shopping, we tank in revenue across our channels on digital. So we have to have a good mix of at least 20 to 25 per total spend in order to keep our paid search and our revenue coming through the website on media specifically.
And I'd say pretty consistent as well. Paid search continues to be something that it's driving everything from awareness to conversion. One of the things that, I see as a bright spot of the pandemic that we've started doing more of and will continue is really, again, just focusing on listening. What is the conversation that's happening, whether it be around, your business, or whether it be more of a local impact or even a macro impact. So for example, through the pandemic, as I mentioned at the start, everyone was very concerned about cleanliness and sanitation. And so being a part of that conversation, that then slowly migrated to, I've been stuck inside my home, I need something fun to do, and we'll come to the car wash. It's fun, it's entertaining, and you're going to get a great car wash anyway. Well, that's really then continuing to evolve as we listen to, through the pandemic with car prices and car inventory, and it's been so difficult to purchase, whether it be a new or a used car. Well, then we pivoted that conversation to say, well, you need to protect your current asset, and what better way to do that? And I don't know if we would have been able to update our content so quickly to then have relevant search to complement that if we weren't really listening to what people were saying and listening to what was happening outside of, just car wash, or outside of what, our members might be saying.
I mean, the biggest thing that we saw across our clients is, and honestly, this really doesn't apply to 2022, given the level of inflation, but from the beginning of the pandemic all the way through end of 2021, there was such a concern about leaving your house, and vaccination rates where everyone was more or less scared. We stopped putting so much of an emphasis on what a great deal for our clients are, or how much you're going to save, or get this discount. We were focusing on how can we make it as convenient to you for the clients? Can we come to you? Can we deliver straight to your door? Can it be contactless? Can it be card only, touch? Anything to help emphasize that we are sitting there on a degree of convenience and safety we discovered was starting to outweigh the level of cost savings. Granted, now that we've seen high gas prices and inflation, that we're starting to see that shift back a little bit. But if we go back to that same level that we were seeing it in the second half of 2021, we go back to focusing on a degree of convenience because we're discovering people are willing to pay for that little bit more if it means they're going to be safe. I don't want to say it's a perpetuating fear mongering, but it was a good way for us to do it. And we were able to reduce our loss by giving discounts on our, we reduced our discounts, which reduced our overall ROI loss simultaneously. So here's another one. We've all been through the great resignation for this past year. If there's someone in this room that hasn't had a problem retaining staff or hiring staff, God bless you. Please tell me what you're doing. But because of so many people leaving their jobs, a lot of operations have had to start relying more on AI automation. Now, the big debate is, should we be doing it? Should we be relying on the machines or the robots taking our jobs, if we will, given all the macro factors between domestic violence, politics, the pandemic, the scenario in Ukraine right now? Should we be relying on AI? Because honestly, it cannot adapt as quickly. Or if it does, it doesn't come out properly. So we all kind of have our own thought processes on this one. I'll turn it to Ross.
Yeah. So from our side, I mean, just looking at each business is different, right? But I really think that when it comes to AI and automation, it comes down to the segmentation approach, like the hyper look at those small segments within your business. So we have restoration, but we have 12 sub-segments of restoration. So looking at that level and allowing AI to play in, but making sure you're always monitoring it. You've got to make sure that you're delivering where you want to and the content is applicable, but there's a place for it. You have to be a smart marketer with it.
I completely agree with Roz. I think when it comes to, your macro strategy, nothing's going to replace, the human touch and the human element. It's really when we start getting into that segmentation and, a finer point on being able to then go after whether it's a member or a non-member or a segment that's a car enthusiast versus the busy mom. AI allows us to augment that in a way to where it just wouldn't be feasible with the size of our team. But for broader strategy, nothing's going to replace any of us in this room. So no need to worry, John. It's not Armageddon.
Well, not yet. I mean, my stance is I like the AI because it does save time. It saves bandwidth. However, with every once in a lifetime scenario that's happened in the past 24 months, every like 25 of them at this point, we're discovering that the AI just can't adapt to the new crisis of the day. So we still use it, but we struggle to get it going long enough term before we have to make an adoption to it. So we have to constantly interject simultaneously. So I sit very much on the fence about, I would love the AI system. We do utilize it, but we have so much human intervention into it simultaneously that we're just not confident that we're using it to the full capability some days. So it's kind of a mixed bag, if you will. So I'm going to put a scenario out there that I truly hope does not happen, but it'll probably will. If this pandemic gets worse or another domestic event or scenario transpires, granted, I wrote this like 2 weeks ago, so take it as you will. Are you comfortable with the place that your current strategies are? Would you continue on with them, or would you have to take a different approach or a different scenario given everything that's going on?
Yeah, so I would say that, not necessarily a different approach, John, but it's so important that all of us are in tune to not just the macro factors of what's going on, but really understanding what's happening at a local level. And that's what needs to be leveraged to then not maybe adapt the strategy as much as maybe adapt the content. I'll give an example. So right now, for those of you in the room, I happen to be one of them who lives in the West and the Southwest. We are in the midst of what is going to be, the driest summer that we've ever had. And so there's a lot of concern about water and preservation of watershed. So, here I am, right? I come from the car wash company. We have to use water to wash a car, and we're incredibly responsible with that water, and we use very little water. But in this moment, it didn't really feel right to be talking about car washings. We, pivoted that messaging. We're talking about watershed preservation right now. And what are we doing to preserve the watershed to ensure that anything that leaves the car wash can go back safely into that watershed? And more importantly, you know, what can we do beyond Mr. itself to help our members and consumers be a part of that preservation? So I think it's just really critical. I mean, the last 2 years none of us could have predicted all the things that have occurred and all that we've been through, so much more than just the pandemic. It's really critical that you're in tune to, well, what's happening in the communities that I serve, because it's probably going to be different at any given time. And you need to have these like hyper local content strategies within your broader brand overarching messaging.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think none of us can predict what's going to be next, right? I think we've all learned that you just got to be prepared to be nimble and go. My biggest piece of preparedness is getting to a point where we know our customers at a very individual level. So we're prepared for that. Examples like Walmart's one of our biggest contractors. So with them knowing that they may have to pull out of a job that's worth millions to us, we need to lock them in so they come back to us. So we'll offer them same pricing, whether it's 6 months from now or a year from now, and we guarantee your products to you. Giving that kind of, we know your business and we know what's going to happen if you have to leave this job, or if something happens to your business, we're in this with you. That's very important to be prepared for anything that comes at you. So really get to know whether it's a client in your agency side, or for us, we're brands, and we got to know our customers really well.
So we built a COVID plan in March of 2020. It was designed for 2 to 3 weeks because that was short-sighted, let's just say. Here we are going into year 3. So by by June of 2020, we said, all right, this is going to go away, and we have other factors. It was an election cycle year. There were wildfires going on. Everything that could go wrong was going on. You all lived it. You understand. So what we started doing is we started building everybody grow up doing those pick your own path books. Exactly. So we essentially built some strategies for different scenarios. If it's a terrorist attack or a war, we go with this plan. If it's the continuation of the pandemic, which we were literally calling status quo, we go with this plan. If it's an election cycle, we go to this plan. For example, if it's an election cycle for president versus a non-presidential cycle, we know that extra money is being dumped into online video and it being dumped into social. We can expect our CPCs to go up, and we won't get as much of a reach, so we'll start to pull back on that and look into online video or CTV. If it's quieter and there's a shortage or a food shortage or supply shortage, then we pump more into search because we know there's going to be a higher intake demand and start pulling back. So we've had to build these plans. It's very unfortunate that we've had to do it, but this is how we now have to manage our media going forward and how we have to adapt if, God forbid, this thing gets worse. That's just kind of our reality, unfortunately. Don't mean to be such a Debbie Downer on this one, but that went downhill fast.
It's our reality.
Yeah.
It's been 2
All right,
years now.
so let's, I'm looking at my other question. It's going to get worse here. So let's progress with that. Are you returning to a pre-COVID investment level or media approach? I don't want to say, obviously, we're not out of the pandemic. It's still very much wild and rampant around us, but we are seeing what we're considering the new normal, if you will, which I hate myself for using that term, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting for us. We're back to comparing. Our year-over-year comparison for this year is to 2019. So we do year-over-year minus COVID. We pretend like that. We take that out of graphs, actually. We go 2019 and then we go to 2022. It's like this middle ground didn't exist for our analysis. So because of that, because we had this huge increase and we were spending differently, we actually spend 68% more than we did during COVID at the same traffic level as 2019. So we are spending more to remain at the same level. However, AOV is up by $100. So there is some silver lining here. You can imagine how my CFO feels about that when I go to him and say, we got to keep spending. But the reality is it's so competitive now. People learned how to shop online. People learned how to use all these different vehicles in front of them. So now we have to be present and in front of them all the time, which is why we're using 6 media channels now. And paid search is our biggest spender because we need to be there no matter what they're looking for. And it's at a product level that we're advertising to. It's not just the brand.
Our experience is a little different in that our spend in 2019 on a percent of sales was pretty consistent in 2020, 2021, and now in 2022. I've been fortunate where we've been able to kind of grow as the business has grown, even in the midst of this global pandemic. I think a lot of that is driven by the type of business that we are, right? Brick and mortar. You still do have a lot of that word of mouth. I'm driving by, I'm going to come in and get a car wash. So for us, it's been less about the spend that has changed. It's been more about how do we leverage that spend. So putting more into paid search, putting more into digital, into programmatic, into paid social, and scaling back on some of more of the traditional methods that we were using in 2019, 2018, such as out of home and print media.
I mean, we look across our client base right now, the vices, as I call them, our fast food or alcohol, they have continued to grow. Even in 22, I have one QSR that's up 47% over 2021, which I still don't understand how people can consume that much fast food, but those folks won't be around long term. Let's call it that. And then we see the alcohol sales. People have unfortunately gone to a degree of comfort. So, and the reality is, we are not back to pre-COVID levels. We are far superseding them. But it's not just in our investment levels, but our traffic and our sales have continued to go through the roof. And the ones that were struggling the most, your healthcare, your retail financial services, even travel, have all started to come back. So some of them are approaching the return of pre-COVID levels because they now understand how they have to operate within it. That being said, another lockdown may revert things completely. And other ones have found this new niche, however you say it, that's caused them to grow so much so that we don't know when they will ever go back down. But if they do, it'll be a shock and awe scenario for us. So something we also have to help prepare brands to understand, like, at some point, we're going to hit a point that we can't grow any further. But knock on wood, we haven't seen that yet. So now, oh yeah, this is where it gets morbid. There's more and more unexpected scenarios happening that impact brands in different ways. Ukraine, the domestic politics, incidents that have been happening weekly within the U.S. How are brands successfully, more so, how are your brands successfully navigating their digital media programs without losing any momentum while this is all going on?
So first, for the record, it is niche.
I'm with her.
Thanks.
And, you know, gosh, John, you're all doom and gloom, but I actually think there's very much a silver lining in what we're seeing. So, you know, should we, you know, go into a recession, should there be other macro factors that impact, you know, spend, I think it's important that you all look at your own brand to say, well, how can we be a part of adding value during that time? So, for example, at Mr., you know, we look no further than the car. You know, for most of you, your car is probably your largest investment. If you own a home, it's probably your second largest investment. Should there come a time where, you know, maybe making a new purchase, whether that be a used or new car, not make sense, you're going to want to protect that investment you have. And just like getting your oil changed, you know, a car wash is car maintenance. So for us, it's really just, again, ensuring that there's an understanding of the value that our product and our services can provide and offer amongst all of the other benefits. You know, at the core, we can help protect that large investment. And we just know human behavior in a recession is you are looking to protect what you currently have. And so that's somewhere where, you know, we actually think we can be a solution and add value, and not be fearful of that. Instead, look to help our customers.
I mean, it's super, I agree. I think that it's really important to not be tone deaf to the environment anymore. I think a brand that is tone deaf in the current environment, no matter what the issue, it's hard to recover from that. You have to keep good eyes on it. I think for us, it's really increasing the reviews, internal and external, making sure that we're using the right tone when we're talking to our customers and we're on social, and being prepared to be a true partner to these customers and not the fake customer that says, or the fake business that says, here we are, we're here to help you, now come spend your money, but really find a way to add value and ingrain ourselves into their business model.
I mean, when I look at it, the marketplaces, your Amazon, Walmart, eBay, that ad media and search, they're unaffected because they're all reactive media. They're not proactive. The rest of the time, I literally sit there with my finger on the off switch, if you will. What is the catastrophe of the day? And the reality is we lose a lot of momentum. But to that your point, we would rather lose momentum and stop media and not be insensitive to what's going on around us. That pans out better for us than if we come off as insensitive or tone deaf to what's going on around you. And sometimes you just have to take that hit just to be able to not take a bigger hit later. And someone explained this to me years ago, what the cost of turning off your media is in terms of sale versus having to do a PR release and then a expose of apologies for $50,000 to $100,000 over a 3-month period for your mistakes. So we kind of look at it those options. All right, last doomsday one, and then we'll end on a high note. Well, obviously we see inflation going on. We see gas prices. There is a fear that a recession is looming. How do your businesses adapt to this?
I mean, being a marketer, we're always ahead, right? So for me, it's protect my budget at all costs. I think that the days, at least for the companies I've worked for and the one I work for now, the days of having to pull back because of a recession or having budgets hit, we know marketing is a lot of times the first department hit, right? That's kind of gone. It's now a realization that we really have to maintain to retain our presence and our path that we've already forged forward with, so we can't turn back once you're on that path. So that's a big one, but I think overall it's making sure that when we do have something like this happen, if there is a recession, that you use the right tone in your media, that you're making sure to either just call it out and talk to it and say, we're all struggling, or sorry for your hard times, here's what we can do for you, and not worry about the sell of the product, even though it is a media outlet, so you don't desensitize them to you.
Well said, Ross.
Thanks.
It's
like I rehearsed it.
I completely agree with what you've said, and gosh, if companies are viewing the marketing team as a line item in a P&L that could just easily be cut, how unfortunate, right? Because we so often are the tip of the spear in being the heart of the brand, in establishing a true relationship and connection with our customers, whoever that may be, whether it be a business, whether it be, a consumer. And it's really critical that in times of need, we're listening to what our customers are looking for. And it's probably not to be sold to. It's just to maybe have a relationship that looks a little different and understands what they're going through. And if, we don't have the venue to be able to continue to message in a way that makes sense and that isn't tone deaf, when we get to the other side of that, right, with every low, then there's usually a really big high. I think our brands would be in a worse place. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future. It sounds like Roz is too. So yeah. So John, you're on an island over there. And
No. I am optimistic, but I've also went through the last recession running media, and I just recognize there's always a need to prepare for a worst case scenario. I'd love to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And honestly, the number one thing we always tell any operation when there's an economic crisis possibly looming, all you have to do is be more fluid. You have to communicate. Instead of having monthly meetings, you're having daily or twice a week meetings. You're over communicating, and you're just saying, you know what? Budget's going to become more fluid. You're going to have to stop and start certain scenarios, and we just have to adapt to it there. It's not the end of days. It's just we have to be more conscious and be more reactive than ever before kind of scenarios. See, not bad. Not bad. All right, so we do have one last question. We're going to end on a high note on this one. What's the most positive thing you've taken away from your current state of the pandemic within.
So, I think that what the pandemic has brought forward is just so much more humanity. Like if I were to reflect on just a few of the many things that have happened over the last couple of years, for a business to close its doors for a month to figure out how do we keep our employees safe. We weren't talking about the revenue loss. We were talking about how do we keep everyone safe. Or for, a car wash company to talk about how do we preserve and protect our watersheds, which might feel really counterintuitive. I think it's because for us, it really is more about how are we being great stewards of our communities? How are we being great stewards of our employees, of our customers, and of our members? And, not to say that we didn't have a big heart before the pandemic. I just think the pandemic has helped bring more of that out to recognize we're all human. And that's what's most important at the end of the day, not necessarily, did we meet budget this month? So I think that's been a positive, and that's my take.
Very similar. I think that I hope what doesn't go away is the sheer rawness of us as humans, what we've been willing to share through this. We've had so many customers tell us, both socially on the channels as well as in phone calls, what really matters to them. We've gotten to a very core bottom of what our customers need, and we've been able to service better, been able to communicate better. I think the rawness of what we all went through as a human race has allowed people to realize that there's more to this life than just the bottom dollar, and it allows us to be better marketers. My degree's in history with anthropology, so I feel like I'm just an online anthropologist. That's what I call myself, so if you see that anywhere, that came from me. But that's really what this was. This was a big experiment of the human race, and that rawness I hope doesn't go away, because it's been really good for us, both in our business and personal lives.
The biggest thing that I've seen is we've always viewed these major brands as just money grubbing operations and stuff. And we've seen such degree of adoption to the environment, to what's going on. We've seen from discounts in goodwill loans all the way down to changes in messaging of, are you okay? Are you focusing? And we've seen the brands become increasingly more adjustable and accepting to the environment around them. It just shows just how versatile an operation can be. And that's been one of the most impressive things I've seen in the last 17 years of my career, ultimately. So that's all we've got, unless there's questions. Don't all jump up at once now.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let
me throw this thing at you. Oh, God.
Okay, it was a smooth catch. It was smooth. So I do have a question. With the social, everything that's going on right now, how do you decide as a company, what you're going to comment on or not comment on? I think that sometimes we get inundated with, this is Cheetos' take on this social issue, or, this brand that has nothing to do with this is how they feel about it. Or how do you decide what you're going to mention in your marketing or social media presence or whatever that might be?
Jump in first. I don't know about you, but I am waiting on bated breath to see what Cheetos is going to say about the next crisis. For us, we've really commented on very little. And the reason for that has been because that's what we are hearing. Just if you do any sort of, whether it be social listening, reading through unstructured reviews for your company or others, that's not what consumers are looking for. In fact, there's right now it's trending on LinkedIn of all places, a petition begging brands to please not jump in on the Juneteenth conversation unless you actually have something truly to offer, because it's just coming off as inauthentic, or it's coming across as, a company trying to insert them in a conversation that they really don't have any true value to add. So that's how we've approached it. I mean, there have been some things we have been very vocal on, one around voting rights. And that's really been more employee driven of the importance of voting with our employees. So there are those moments that make sense, but it's going to be very brand specific. And by and large, we've chosen to not engage in conversations that our customers are telling us we don't want you to engage in these.
Very tactfully, if we don't have a real opinion that would help our customer base, we don't say anything. Our social media team, I've driven to them. If our opinion doesn't add value, don't add your opinion. That's where we're at. You have to be careful with that. And I think that if you're not going to add value, you're just adding noise to a conversation that could turn somewhere you don't want to go.
With our brand, it's a case-by-case basis. We have a social team that will provide, a PR team and social team that'll provide the relevant content, and it's the brand's decision whether or not they want to proceed forward with it. We can give them advice on whether or not we think it's a good idea for them. But once again, it depends from a brand and situation by situation perspective. The biggest key here is don't come off as divisive or completely blind and ignorant to the situation. And do not respond on an impulse. Please let there be several layers between you and what's put out there before that statement goes out. Otherwise, it's just going to be terrible.
Also, I'll add in, we have a strategy per platform. So like we can be cheeky on Twitter, but Facebook, let's keep it serious, right? So there's a different approach for each platform too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, the timer tells us our work time is up. So thank you all very much. Oh, wait, question.
I just saved my friend's life here. I just wanted a short question, and I would value your opinion about startups. So you have the founders at the beginning, think they know it all and they think they can do it all. In terms of marketing and content, what would be your best advice to them? Having, this kind of burden that they have to do it all, but sometimes also the thinking that they know it all in terms also in content and marketing. What would be the best advice, what's the point on how to separate yourself from the founder and leave it to the people of marketing, do their job?
I want to make sure I understand that, if that's okay. I'm going to clarify.
Yeah.
Are you guys good? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you mean founder to internal marketing teams, or do you mean on social? Can you clarify which mechanism?
I work with incubation and acceleration programs, and I work with a lot of startup founders. Usually it's a solopreneur, and they need to work on the content and on the marketing side as well to raise up their startup. Sometimes they are aware that there is a certain point that they can do it all and then give it to the more professional people. But sometimes they think they know it all, and it's very hard for them to let go to that. And there is a very thin line, to understand that. And I think your perspective on this would be very valuable.
That's a good question.
So the best example that was ever given to me years ago is my first college degree was in forensic pathology. So I was going to do autopsies and investigate crime scenes. I would have an MD and a PhD. And I would be a doctor. Am I qualified to do neurosurgery? No, but I have the same qualifications up front. The reality is you have to separate. If you think you know how to do everything, you need to go get a second opinion. And we'll bounce that off 2 or 3 people before you do it. That's the biggest thing is if you sit there and think, I can do this and I can do it all, then odds are you can't and you just don't realize it yet. And that's why being a solopreneur, it's a nightmare scenario. As long as you have 1 or 2 other friends, you have someone else to get a second opinion on. That's where you always have to go. And if they have a different opinion than what you think was the right answer, then you're probably not going down the right path ultimately.
So I'm going to put on my agency hat because I used to have clients like this. We would say, what are your favorite competitors, or who is your competitor? And then have them go out and audit that competitor. And then we would tear their audit apart. Mm-hmm. Just tactfully, to prove our point, it is show us what great looks like, and then we'll show you how much better you could be if you got the experts to help you.
And I would just add, and I very much respect the position you're in, having a long time ago worked for a founder. I think first and foremost, you have to understand where they're coming from, right? Usually this is their baby, this is their livelihood. They've invested so much of themselves into it. So in any approach you take, I love the word that Roz used, you have to be tactful and you have to be really kind of empathetic and understanding. But what has worked for me has been let's look at your plan and what are your objectives? What goals are we looking for? And let me put together a plan as well. And maybe let's test and execute that. And let's see if maybe some of these new ideas would help us grow even faster or help us go after a customer segment that we didn't think we could go after. I think if you come from a place of like, I'm here to help versus I'm critiquing what you're doing, you're going to go a lot further.
And I just want to add to that because I currently work with enterprise incubation units. So think like really grand ideas in like a Microsoft and trying to become an entire org of itself. I found a lot of success helping my clients separate vision and tact. And that's kind of what these folks are saying too, is when you can help them articulate what their vision is and you can be the person who puts tact behind that vision, they're more likely to let you carry on with the things that need to get done for that vision. Because many a times, these solo entrepreneurs are big thinkers, they're big dreamers, and they've got massive ideas, and they don't always know how to put that into play. And so if you can come in as the expert and can navigate the steps that need to happen for those visions to become reality, they're more likely to trust your opinion and your advice as they roll things out.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.